At the time of the suicide air attacks on our carrier unit to the south, aircraft of Task Unit 77.4.2 had returned from missions at Leyte, and the first strike was being launched against enemy surface forces attacking Task Unit 77.4.3. The result of our torpedo attacks and the simultaneous accurate fire of our 5-inch guns was a temporary decrease in fire from the enemy's main force. Shortly after 0800, 2 enemy heavy cruisers and 2 destroyers deployed on our left flank forged ahead and directed their heaviest fire on the Gambier Bay, Callanan Bay, and San Lo. As the range closed, the Callanan Bay opened fire with her 5-inch gun. Immediately, the Jap cruisers intensified their fire on the carriers, scoring 2 direct hits forward on the Callanan. Notwithstanding the concentrated fire, the Gambier Bay, by maneuvering on each side of the base course, successfully avoided salvo after salvo until the first hit at about 0810. The enemy main body, composed of battleships and cruisers, is closing rapidly. 0820, the Johnston opens fire on a Congo at 7,000 yards. The destroyer escort Roberts reports concentrating most of her fire on a Tone-class heavy cruiser. The Gambier Bay receives hit in forward engine room, and thereafter is hit almost continuously on the flight deck and spaces above the waterline. And about 0827, she slows to 11 knots and is dropping astern out of formation. About 0828, the DEs are ordered to make smoke between our carriers and the enemy cruisers on the port side. 0830, the main body cruisers close the range on the Gambier Bay, while Johnston attempts to draw fire away from the Gambier by taking the nearest cruiser under fire. The range closes to 6,000 yards, and numerous hits are observed, but this attempt was unsuccessful. The enemy cruisers closing on the port quarter are pouring salvo after salvo into the water near our leading CVEs. 0840, Johnston checks fire on the cruiser and opens fire on enemy destroyers advancing on the starboard quarter of the formation. 0842, our planes are now attacking. Personnel on the Dennis observe a bomb hit on a cruiser. 0845, Heermann receives her first hit, followed by heavy caliber shell hits forward. Leading carriers commence firing as the cruisers on the port quarter close the range to within 18,000 yards. Fanshawe Bay reports salvos from enemy battleships infrequent and inaccurate. About 0850, Roberts, firing the heaviest fire of which a DE is capable, tackles a heavy cruiser and receives her first hit, a salvo. Callanan Bay and San Lo are exchanging fire with enemy DDs closing from starboard quarter. Johnston has been firing on these destroyers and reports 12 hits on the leader of a column of 7. This one, believed to be a Teratsuki, turns away, and Johnston shifts fire and observes hits on the second Jap destroyer. Johnston takes several hits herself. Nevertheless, her captain attempts to cross the T of the Jap column. Before this was accomplished, all remaining 6 Jap destroyers turned to the right, and the range began to open temporarily. Johnston shifts fire to the cruisers, closing on the port quarter. The Gambier Bay is in a sinking condition. The order is given to abandon ship. Salvos falling near our carriers become close straddles. Fanshawe Bay is hit again. Enemy cruisers are threatening to turn the CVEs back to the northward toward the main enemy disposition. 77.4.3 torpedo planes have expended their bombs and torpedoes and are now ordered to make dummy runs in the hope of disrupting enemy fire or slowing the cruisers. A tremendous explosion on the escort Roberts, believed to be hits from 14-inch high-capacity shells. All power lost, and ship aft of the stack was left an inert mass of battered metal. Before the word to abandon ship was passed, the crew of number 2 gun loaded, rammed, and fired 6 charges entirely by hand. While attempting to get off the 7th, the gun exploded. Aircraft of Task Unit 77.4.2 initiate their first strike on the enemy cruisers and battleships and report torpedo hits on 2 cruisers. 0910, Fanshawe Bay reports 2 enemy heavy cruisers of the Tone and Nachi class with 2 destroyers closing on Port Bean, distance 13,600 yards. Main Japanese battle fleet reported breaking formation and maneuvering radically to evade air attack. Johnston, still underway but seriously damaged, shifts fire from cruisers to enemy starboard destroyers closing again. About 0924, when our situation was most desperate, and when his flanking cruisers were within 10,000 yards range, the enemy, having received severe damage to several of his cruisers and battleships, and having lost one cruiser and one destroyer sunk, apparently issued a retirement order. According to reports, the heroic destroyers Roberts and Johnston were dead in the water and sinking at about 0930. A pilot called and reported a torpedo approaching from the port beam, also many from the starboard quarter. St. Lo sights a number of them porpoising. Carriers maneuver to parallel the wakes. A plane strafes one torpedo, which explodes in the wake of the Callan Bay. Another explodes on the port quarter. St. Lo and Callan Bay attempt to explode the torpedoes with 40 and 20 millimeter gunfire. No torpedo hits. 0952, Japanese force reported fading to the north off radar screen. 1050, enemy planes approached task unit 77.4.3. No bogies appeared on the radar screen, and it was thought that they approached from low altitude, climbed very rapidly inside SK range, and began their dives from 5,000 or 6,000 feet. The Zeeks started their dives almost simultaneously. Two planes dived toward the white planes, were taken under AA fire, and one was hit. The smoking plane turned suddenly from the white planes, and at 10:52 dived into the deck of the St. Lo, starting a large fire, which was followed by at least 4 separate explosions. The St. Lo sank stern first at 11:23. Planes of Task Group 38.1 of the 3rd Fleet arrived over the retreating enemy at about 13:30 and delivered their first attack about 1400. As the enemy continued to retreat northward, they were continually attacked and harassed by planes of 38.1 and by the planes of our CVE force. The enemy's remaining forces, consisting of about 14 ships out of a possible 20, including his 4 battleships, were last reported entering San Bernardino Straits at 2200 that night, leaving several cripples far to the rear. These were finished off the next day by the forces of Task Force 38.